a man standing at the edge of his life. A nation spiraling into confusion, a revelation ready to reshape humanity's future. Picture the moment when God removes the barrier between heaven and earth and selects one man alone to write down the greatest mystery ever revealed. Have you ever wondered why, out of all 66 books in the Bible, Isaiah is seen as the most remarkable? Why he is called the evangelist of the Old Testament? What is it about his words that made Jesus himself refer to him more than any other prophet? Today you're going to discover something that will forever change how you understand the Bible. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear isn't just ancient history. It's a hidden message meant for people living today. A book that predicted the virgin birth 7 centuries in advance, described the crucifixion with chilling detail before crucifixion even existed, and portrayed the Messiah with unmatched clarity. This message comes free, but its effect on your life could be immense. If these words have moved you, show your support with a simple act. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. This helps us continue sharing this message daily. And what if I told you Isaiah didn't only speak about the past? His words contain direct warnings and promises aimed at our time, many of which are coming true right before us. Do you know why people call Isaiah the 5th Gospel? Because his book contains 66 chapters, just as the Bible contains 66 books. The first 39 focus on judgment, just like the Old Testament, and the final 27 speak of hope, mirroring the New Testament. Coincidence? Not a chance. What you're about to learn will leave you speechless, because Isaiah holds prophecies so precise, so beyond human foresight, that doubters have searched for explanations for centuries and have failed every time. Get ready for a journey that will reshape your faith, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at the Bible the same way again. In that year, darkness hung over Jerusalem. King Uzziah's death had spread a wave of fear and doubt across all of Judah. On the streets, fear spread like silent rivers, showing itself in every face. The king had ruled for 52 years, bringing security and prosperity, but now his passing seemed to signal the arrival of a dark and uncertain era. Isaiah, a young priest from a respected family, watched these events with increasing worry. Since childhood, he had heard tales of God's power and watched the temple rituals, but now Jerusalem seemed to have lost its purpose. Corruption and idolatry had begun poisoning the city's very core. Those in power, nobles and priests alike, who should have led with integrity, now only chased after selfish desires. Isaiah was troubled in his spirit. Alone in a quiet room near the temple, he sat in silence, deep in thought. Outside, the wind howled, battering the windows as though it carried a warning of what lay ahead. He sensed that something was about to change dramatically, though he couldn't yet explain how. His heart felt uneasy, torn between fear and expectation. Without warning, the door flew open, breaking the silence. "Brother Isaiah! Brother Isaiah!" cried Jeremiah, his dear companion. "Have you heard what's happened? Our borders are in danger. The Assyrians are marching against us." They believe that with Uzziah gone, we are vulnerable and easy to conquer. Isaiah took a slow, steady breath before responding. "And our people, Jeremiah, how are they reacting to this?" Jeremiah lowered his gaze, his face clouded with sadness and confusion. "Some are already talking about making alliances with nations who bow to false gods." Isaiah's expression grew even more serious. "Jeremiah, our safety will never come from human agreements. We must turn back to the God of our ancestors." Jeremiah looked straight into Isaiah's eyes. "But who will listen to you now? Who will open their ears to your words in times like these?" Isaiah stayed silent for a while, staring into the distance where dark clouds were gathering. Maybe no one will listen today, but someone must speak up. Someone has to remind our people who their true king is." Jeremiah gave a small nod, moved by the strength in his friend's words. Later, as Isaiah walked toward the temple, he noticed people arguing in the streets, their voices tense with worry, and women crying for their sons who might soon be sent to war. An elderly priest approached him with a look of defeat. "Young Isaiah, do you really believe God still listens to us? Look around. Can't you see he has turned his back on us?" Isaiah answered with quiet determination, "God never abandons us. It is we who have walked away from him." The old man shook his head, unconvinced, and slowly disappeared into the crowd. When Isaiah entered the temple, the silence was heavy, almost something you could feel pressing on your skin. Moving closer to the altar, he knelt down with care and began to pray, "God of our ancestors, we are lost. Our nation has strayed far from your law. Our hope grows weaker. Where else can we turn but to you?" As he prayed, a mighty wind began to stir within the temple, causing the sacred veil to shiver slightly. A presence unlike anything he had ever known filled the air, powerful and impossible to ignore. From behind the veil, a brilliant light burst forth, so radiant it seemed to pierce through him. Isaiah's eyes welled up with tears. His body shook violently. "Lord," he cried out, his voice unsteady, "what am I witnessing?" A voice rang out, vast and powerful. "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory." Isaiah collapsed to the ground, unable to stand beneath the weight of what he saw. Feeling unworthy and full of shame, he cried out in sorrow, "I am undone, for my lips are impure, and I dwell among a people who speak with unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." At that moment, a heavenly being flew swiftly toward the altar, picking up a burning coal with tongs. Isaiah's heart pounded within him. The being drew near with a calm, merciful presence and gently brought the glowing coal close to the young priest's lips. "Do not be afraid, Isaiah," the being said in a voice both soft and commanding. "This burning coal has touched your lips. Your guilt has been removed. Your sins are forgiven." The pain Isaiah felt was sharp and consuming, yet it brought with it a strange sense of freedom. Then the voice of the Lord echoed once more through the temple. "Whom shall I send? Who will go on our behalf?" Isaiah slowly lifted his head. Though he understood the hardships that lay ahead, something within him urged him to respond. With conviction, he raised his voice. "Here I am, Lord. Send me." But he could not yet know that this vision would remain etched in his soul for the rest of his days. Isaiah stayed kneeling on the temple's cold stone floor, his heart pounding, his thoughts spinning in confusion. His lips still burned where the coal had touched them, yet something far greater was unfolding before his eyes, something beyond human grasp. The very ground beneath him seemed to hum with unseen energy. The walls, the air itself, seemed to pulse with a force he could not name. A brilliant light shone so fiercely that Isaiah shielded his eyes with trembling hands, unable to face its brilliance. Between his shaking fingers, he could just make out incredible details. A mighty throne stood before him, raised high, radiating a pure and piercing light. Seated upon it was the Lord, vast beyond measure, his face hidden by his boundless glory. Around the throne flew heavenly beings, each with 6 wings, moving without rest. Isaiah watched, awestruck and afraid, as 2 of their wings veiled their faces, 2 covered their feet, and with the other 2 they hovered above the ground. A song deep and resounding filled the temple, repeating without pause, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." The sound of their voices reached into the depths of Isaiah's being. making every part of him tremble. The very temple shook under the weight of that proclamation, while thick smoke began to fill the space, dimming his sight. Gripped by fear, Isaiah whispered to himself, "How can I survive this? No man can withstand such a vision." With every repetition of the angelic chant, his heart felt heavier under the crushing realization of his impurity. It was not just fear that overtook him. It was the unbearable weight of shame in the presence of absolute holiness. He lowered his head, a single tear slipping down his face and falling onto the temple floor. "I am undone," he whispered again, trembling beneath the weight of the moment. "I am not worthy of this. I should not be allowed to witness such glory. I am a man with impure lips, and I dwell among people who speak with impure lips." Isaiah pressed his hands against his chest, struggling to breathe as an unbearable weight seemed to crush him. Each breath became harder, his strength fading beneath the weight of the vision. "Why have you brought me here, Lord?" he cried out, feeling utterly unworthy to endure such holiness. As he knelt trembling, the voice that echoed through the temple grew even louder. Isaiah realized with terror that the very floor beneath him was shaking under the power of the heavenly declaration. Tears streamed down his face as he fully grasped the depth of his impurity before such perfect holiness. "There is no hope for me here," he whispered in despair. "I am in the presence of the living God. No human can survive before him." Then, suddenly, a shadow fell over Isaiah, breaking through his hopeless thoughts. Slowly, he lifted his head and saw one of the seraphim approaching quickly. Terror seized his heart, convinced this would be the end. The heavenly being held something in his hand. Isaiah strained to see and felt his heart freeze in fear when he recognized it. A burning coal taken from the altar of heaven itself. Its fiery light illuminated the temple, casting shifting shadows on the smoke-covered walls. The seraphim came closer, his piercing gaze locked on the trembling prophet. "No, Lord, I cannot endure this," Isaiah begged, attempting uselessly to pull back. The being landed softly before him, firmly holding the glowing ember. His eyes shone with peace and reassurance. "Isaiah," said the seraph with a steady and soothing tone, "this coal will cleanse your lips. Do not fear." Before Isaiah could respond, he felt the burning coal touch his lips. The pain was fierce, yet mingled with a deep sense of purification and release. He cried out, not from the heat, but from the overwhelming wave of emotion. The heavenly being gave him a gentle smile as he removed the ember. "Your guilt is taken away. Your sins are forgiven." Still overwhelmed by the moment's intensity, Isaiah slowly raised his eyes to the throne shining before him. He felt as though a heavy burden had vanished from within him, leaving him light and free. Then a powerful and majestic voice sounded again, this time with a clarity that shook him to his core. "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" The divine question filled Isaiah with a strength he had never known before. Without stopping to consider what might come next, Isaiah answered at once, his voice steady and sure. "Here I am, Lord. Send me." Yet as those words left his lips, a cold shiver ran through his body. A quiet voice within warned him that nothing in his life would remain as it was. He couldn't begin to imagine the pain, the rejection, and the hardships that lay ahead. Gradually, the blinding light began to fade, and Isaiah understood that the vision was drawing to a close. But just as he thought he could finally catch his breath, a wave of sorrow swept over him. Something remained hidden, something he would have to carry for a long time to come. At the very moment he believed this experience was finished, a new and terrifying scene began to appear before his eyes. And when Isaiah thought he would not survive it, something utterly unexpected occurred. The burning sensation on his lips lingered. Though the heavenly being had already left with the burning coal, the heat remained, throbbing fiercely. The pain was mixed with an odd sense of comfort, as though, moment by moment, something unclean was being pulled out from deep within him. Still on his knees, Isaiah kept his eyes closed, gasping for breath. His whole body shook. His hands, pressed against the cold temple floor, barely managed to hold him up. It felt as though he hung suspended between death and life, between the earthly and the holy. Then a gentle but commanding voice broke through the silence. "Get up, Isaiah." With great effort, he opened his eyes. In front of him, still floating above the ground, was the seraph who had touched his lips. The light surrounding the being was now softer, yet the splendor of the place remained undeniable. "Your guilt is gone," the heavenly being said again. "Your sin has been erased." Isaiah, his voice weak and rough, asked, "Why? Why me? I am just a fragile man, full of flaws." The seraph only smiled, as if the answer was so clear it did not need to be spoken aloud. Then the air seemed to tremble once more. A voice, mightier and more majestic than anything Isaiah had ever heard, echoed through the temple walls. "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Isaiah's heart seemed to pause in that instant. The question hung in the air, waiting for someone to respond, as though the entire universe leaned in to hear the answer of a single man. He glanced around, as if searching for someone else who could bear such a task. But the temple stood empty, except for the heavenly beings and the overwhelming presence of God. I am here." His voice faltered at first, but then grew stronger, as if new strength was awakening deep within him. "Here I am, send me." The words escaped before he had time to consider what they might mean. It wasn't a choice made with reason, but with something deeper, something rooted in his very spirit. For a moment, silence settled over everything. Even the seraphim ceased their singing. Only the sound of Isaiah's labored breathing filled the space. Then the light around the throne became even more radiant. It felt as though heaven itself had answered his call. The seraph in front of him moved closer again, looking directly into his eyes with an expression full of both kindness and gravity. "Pay close attention now, Isaiah," came the voice. "The journey ahead will bring great challenges. Your message will be like iron striking rock, yet it will meet stubborn hearts that refuse to bend. You will deliver my words to the nation, but they will close their ears to you. You will declare what is to come, but they will reject your message." Isaiah's face showed his bewilderment. "Master, how long must this continue? When will they finally hear?" The response echoed like distant thunder, shaking the sacred walls around him. "Until their towns crumble with no one left inside, until their homes stand empty and their land becomes barren, until the Almighty sends his people into distant exile, leaving the territory completely abandoned." Isaiah felt his blood freeze. His hands started shaking once more. He realized this calling was much bigger and more burdensome than he had ever conceived. The heavenly messenger then gestured in his direction. Yet Isaiah, even when everything falls apart, some will endure. Like a tree trunk, a sacred offspring will persist. Isaiah breathed deeply, struggling to comprehend everything. He felt insignificant and weak. However, simultaneously, a fresh flame started glowing within his soul. A flame that no refusal, no anguish, and no coming hardship could ever put out. Remaining on his knees, he shut his eyes briefly, mentally preparing for the trials ahead. When his eyes opened once more, the sacred space appeared ordinary again. The thick haze had vanished. No winged beings were visible. No brilliant radiance remained. But Isaiah understood his existence would be forever changed. He rose gradually, gazing toward the sacred platform with wonder and deep respect. When he emerged from the temple, dawn's first light broke through the overcast sky, as though heaven itself was declaring to him that this was merely the start. Isaiah walked a few paces forward and, gazing upon the city, observed citizens carrying on with their daily lives, completely oblivious to the divine encounter he had just experienced. Jeremiah, his companion, noticed him from a distance and hurried over. "Isaiah, where have you been? You appear transformed." Isaiah, his eyes still burning with fervor, simply grinned, drew a long breath and responded, "Jeremiah, I sense the Almighty has assigned me a purpose." Jeremiah gazed at him, shocked. What sort of purpose? Isaiah peered toward the distant horizon, his face grave. "A purpose that will bring more suffering than I can fathom." He answered without pause, unaware of just how agonizing his calling would actually become. Before we proceed, we request your assistance. Subscribe to our channel and click the like button to help us continue delivering profound biblical narratives like Isaiah's to countless souls. Now let's resume following this prophet who glimpsed tomorrow through faithful vision. Isaiah moved deliberately through Jerusalem's pathways, sensing the burden of the assignment he had just accepted. Every footstep seemed to echo with the heavenly words still resonating in his thoughts. "Go and speak to these people." But what the Lord had declared next left the young prophet's spirit heavy with sorrow. "Jeremiah," Isaiah called, addressing his companion as he neared a modest plaza where several men debated matters of governance and conflict. "I must share something with you." Jeremiah turned swiftly. "You remain changed, Isaiah. Since that dawn at the temple, your expression has transformed. What occurred?" Isaiah inhaled deeply, as though gathering strength from his innermost being. "The Almighty summoned me," but he paused briefly. "He also showed me that the nation will refuse my words." "What are you saying?" Jeremiah asked, his brow creasing. "The Lord declared they will possess ears yet not truly hear, eyes yet not truly see. Their spirits will grow stubborn." Jeremiah remained quiet for several moments, as though attempting to comprehend what he had just learned. "So you're telling me the Almighty is sending you to speak, while already knowing everyone will ignore you?" "Precisely," Isaiah answered, his expression filled with sadness. "My calling is to declare truth, Jeremiah, even when none wish to receive it." His companion ran fingers through his hair, bewildered. "This seems senseless, Isaiah. Why would the Almighty act this way?" Isaiah exhaled heavily, because even amid refusal, there exists a higher plan. Some will be preserved, a sacred remnant will endure. The pair continued silently until they arrived at the market entrance. There, Isaiah noticed a cluster of religious authorities, the same individuals he had encountered repeatedly at the temple. Moving forward carefully, Isaiah lifted his voice. "Citizens of Jerusalem, the Lord declares, hear attentively, yet fail to comprehend. Observe closely, yet fail to grasp the meaning." Several men paused to listen. Others merely shook their heads, chuckling with contempt. "Another prophet bringing messages of disaster," one grumbled. "We require warriors, not prophets," another yelled. Isaiah, his stare unwavering and filled with resolve, pressed on. "Make stubborn the spirits of these people, O Lord. Close their ears, cover their eyes, until their towns crumble in devastation, until their farmlands become wasteland." Quiet descended upon the plaza briefly, but soon mockery and curses resumed. "Depart, Isaiah," an aging man called out. "We have no use for your warnings." Jeremiah moved toward his companion, taking hold of his arm. "Come, Isaiah. They lack readiness to receive truth." As they departed, Isaiah abruptly halted and glanced backward. Something within him whispered that this first dismissal was merely the start of an extended and agonizing journey. That evening, returning to his modest dwelling, Isaiah dropped to his knees in prayer. "Master, for how long? How long must I speak while being ignored? How long must I witness my nation moving further away from you?" The response arrived as a gentle voice within his thoughts. "Until the territory lies in ruins, until disorder engulfs the towns, until only a charred tree base remains. Yet from that base, new life shall emerge." Isaiah gradually lifted his gaze, experiencing both dread and optimism. Days passed, and troubling reports started reaching them. Foreign armies approaching, famine spreading, corruption growing throughout the streets. The prophecies Isaiah had declared were starting to unfold right before him. Still, the population stayed unmoved. One dawn, while crossing the market area, Isaiah overheard a cluster of women sobbing. "Another settlement has fallen," one cried out. Isaiah tightened his hands into fists. "They need to listen. They need to grasp this," he whispered to himself. Jeremiah emerged from a nearby alley. "Isaiah, will you persist with this?" "Until my final moment," he responded with determination. Isaiah understood his path would be filled with anguish, dismissal, and isolation. Yet something within assured him that the Almighty's plan exceeded his current comprehension. However, the most significant revelation remained ahead. Life in Jerusalem had grown increasingly strained. Each dawn delivered troubling reports, military defeats, broken diplomatic agreements, starvation in surrounding settlements. Isaiah moved through the pathways, watching the exhausted expressions of his countrymen. He understood his calling was to declare truth, regardless of whether anyone paid attention. Yet this knowledge didn't ease the burden within his spirit. One overcast afternoon, Isaiah received a summons to the royal residence. King Ahaz, currently ruling, seemed uncertain, wavering, and overwhelmed by terror. The danger of attack from the nations of Israel and Syria had sent the ruler into complete panic. Entering the royal chamber, Isaiah immediately felt the anxiety. Armed sentries, whispering counselors, ashen faces marked by concern. "Isaiah," the monarch cried out desperately, "what does your deity declare regarding this situation? We face enemies on all sides. My spirit is consumed by dread." Isaiah drew a steady breath. He shut his eyes briefly, gathering inner strength. Then he moved nearer to the ruler. "Listen to me, descendants of David. Do not fear these two dying embers of wood. Those rulers of Syria and Israel," he started with an authoritative tone. King Ahaz stared at him with anxiety. "Yet how can I remain calm? They have already reached our boundaries." Isaiah stood firm. "The Almighty will provide you with a sign, something that will demonstrate his continued sovereignty." He hesitated momentarily and gazed directly into the monarch's eyes. "Look, a young woman will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel." A profound quiet settled across the chamber. "What?" Ahaz inquired, clearly bewildered. "A young woman conceiving? That cannot be." The counselors surrounding him started muttering, sharing skeptical looks. "This is nonsense," one whispered. "Isaiah, your words are confusing," another declared with annoyance. Jeremiah, who had joined Isaiah at the palace, moved closer and spoke quietly. "Isaiah, are you certain about what you received?" Isaiah affirmed with conviction. "Completely." While the men present questioned, chuckled, and ridiculed the declaration, Isaiah remained motionless. His attention was focused on something far beyond mortal comprehension. "Emmanuel," he whispered gently, almost like a sacred word. As they departed the palace, Jeremiah walked alongside Isaiah, still bewildered. "A young woman? How? How is that possible?" Isaiah halted and faced his companion. "I cannot explain it, Jeremiah. I don't comprehend the method, yet I'm certain this is what the Almighty revealed, and I'm confident that someday that child will arrive. But the citizens, Jeremiah pressed, they barely trust what you currently proclaim. How could they possibly embrace something this extraordinary? Isaiah gazed upward at the sky, now filled with dark clouds. I don't fully understand everything either, my companion, yet I know my duty is to speak. In the following days, word of the prophecy traveled swiftly. Everywhere Isaiah went, he overheard the conversations. A child from a young woman. Impossible, some declared. Now the prophet has completely lost his mind, others sneered. There were chuckles, scorn, even open hostility. One morning, while heading toward the temple, Isaiah encountered a group of young men. "Listen, prophet," one called out. "When will your Emmanuel arrive?" "We understand. You enjoy speaking in symbols, correct?" Isaiah paused, observing them peacefully. Mock today, scoff now, but the Almighty's words never fail. The group erupted in laughter as they departed. Returning to his dwelling, Isaiah knelt once more, as he had countless times previously. "Master, why do you reveal things my understanding cannot comprehend? Why do you command me to announce a sign so enigmatic?" The stillness of evening was his sole response. Then, as he remained there with closed eyes and a burdened spirit, Isaiah experienced another fleeting vision. A woman surrounded by radiance, her womb expanding, and an infant cradled in her embrace. "Emmanuel," he murmured, tears flowing down his cheeks. The scene disappeared as suddenly as it had emerged. Isaiah stayed perfectly still, fighting to catch his breath. "This goes against all earthly reasoning," he whispered as tears kept falling. Isaiah understood that what he had witnessed contradicted all mortal understanding. The weeks after the disclosure of the Emmanuel sign proved even more difficult for Isaiah. Anxiety in Jerusalem was building like a tempest ready to unleash. Hostile forces encircled the territory, and dread had seized everyone. Nevertheless, Isaiah awakened each dawn with identical resolve to share the message of hope that the Almighty had given him. On a frigid morning, Isaiah positioned himself in the city's main plaza. There, traders were arranging their booths, and people wandered around discussing recent military dangers. Isaiah lifted his voice with certainty. "Listen to me, citizens of Judah. Do not allow terror to overwhelm you. The Lord himself will provide you with a sign. A young woman will become pregnant and deliver a son, and he will be named Emmanuel, the Almighty among us." Some individuals paused to hear him. Others simply continued walking, shaking their heads in rejection. From the gathering, a man called out sarcastically, "Look, the visionary prophet has returned with his warnings of catastrophe and impossible pledges." Another man, wearing a harsh expression, added, "Emmanuel, what manner of deity permits such anguish to befall us?" Isaiah, remaining steadfast, proceeded, "Even amid hopelessness, there exists promise. This child will serve as proof that the Almighty has not forsaken us. Even during quiet moments, even when everything surrounding us declares failure, the Lord remains with us." Jeremiah, always close by, approached and whispered, "Isaiah, can't you see that the more you declare, the more animosity you create? They regard you with scorn." Isaiah shut his eyes momentarily. "I understand, Jeremiah, but if the Almighty commanded me to speak, I will speak. Even if none trust, his message does not return unfulfilled." That evening, Isaiah brought his family together at home. With his spouse and children beside him, he spoke with deep feeling in his voice. "My children, I realize many ridicule me. They claim I've lost my mind. But I want you to understand, I trust every word the Lord has shared with me. Someday, this child, this Emmanuel, will arrive, and he will transform everything." His wife, typically reserved, softly placed her hand on his. "I trust you, my beloved." Isaiah smiled, his eyes filling with tears. Days afterward, a group of religious authorities came seeking Isaiah at the temple. Their expressions were grave, almost threatening. Isaiah, the senior among them, said, "We cannot permit you to continue spreading false comfort among the citizens. We are already enduring enough." "These declarations are not my own," Isaiah responded with resolve. "They come from the Lord of armies. If he commanded me to announce hope, that is my purpose." The man scoffed with fury. "Then may your deity shield you, because the citizens grow weary of hollow pledges." As the authorities departed, Isaiah remained there, solitary in the temple, his gaze locked on the sacred altar. "Master, I am exhausted. My spirit suffers, yet I will not retreat." That evening, Isaiah experienced a short dream. In his dream, he observed a young boy playing among the olive groves, wearing a tranquil expression and possessing a calmness that seemed to encompass everything. "Emmanuel," he murmured upon waking, his cheeks damp with tears. Yet even in that vision of promise, Isaiah sensed something more significant, something still concealed from his comprehension. The sign of the young woman was merely the start, but it was only a symbol. The deepest mystery stayed hidden. Time passed slowly, and Jerusalem remained immersed in doubt. Military dangers were escalating, and starvation was starting to reach the most impoverished households. The citizens moved through the pathways with lowered heads, their expressions vacant, bearing the crushing burden of despair. Isaiah, nevertheless, stayed unwavering. Each dawn, before sunlight had even appeared, he ascended one of the nearby hills to commune with God. "Master," he murmured, his eyes raised toward the still darkened heavens, "your nation is weary. We stand at the brink of destruction. We require a message, a symbol, illumination." That morning, while still kneeling, something remarkable occurred. Isaiah felt his frame shake. A fresh vision filled his consciousness. It seemed as though the skies had parted before him. He witnessed a child, yet not an ordinary child. There was a unique radiance surrounding him, as if the very magnificence of the Almighty dwelt upon that small form. A celestial voice resonated, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be granted to us, and leadership will rest on his shoulders, and he will be named Amazing Counselor, Powerful God, Eternal Father, Ruler of Peace." Isaiah opened his eyes, shaken, his pulse quickened. "A ruler of peace," he whispered, still attempting to understand the significance of what he had just witnessed. Without delay, Isaiah descended the hill and rushed through Jerusalem's streets. He discovered a small crowd assembled at the marketplace entrance and without pause began to declare, "Hear me, people of Judah, there is hope. The Lord has shown me that a child will arrive. He will establish governance, fairness, and eternal peace. He will be called Amazing Counselor, Powerful God, Eternal Father, Ruler of Peace." People halted, some intrigued, others doubtful. A middle-aged man dressed like a trader folded his arms and called out, "Another child, Isaiah? Was the tale of Emmanuel not sufficient? And now you arrive with yet another prophecy." A woman carrying her young child inquired tentatively, "When, Isaiah? When will this child arrive?" "We grow tired of waiting." Isaiah breathed deeply. "I cannot say when, but I know that the Almighty fulfills his promises." Jeremiah, constantly beside him, drew him aside. "Isaiah, do you understand what you're doing? Every fresh word you utter seems to fragment the people further. Some begin to trust, but many more turn against you." "I understand, Jeremiah, but the message isn't mine." Isaiah tightened his hand into a fist. "I cannot stay quiet." That evening, resting on his modest bed, Isaiah could hardly rest. The vision's words repeated constantly in his thoughts. Ruler of peace, powerful God, eternal Father, Master. How can a simple child carry such magnificent titles? He questioned in prayer. Who will this son be? How will we identify him? The next days proved even more challenging. Each time Isaiah stood to address the public, the strain intensified. Some religious authorities started spreading claims that he was losing his sanity. They insisted his visions were merely products of weariness and despair. One afternoon, Isaiah was moving through the temple halls when a group of priests confronted him. "Isaiah," said the senior priest with commanding tone, "we demand you cease speaking about these children. You're bewildering the people." "Bewildering," Isaiah replied, his eyes blazing with resolve. "I am declaring truth. The Almighty is speaking." "Truth," ridiculed another priest. "What manner of deity promises deliverance through a child? Where is the military force? Where is the power we require?" Isaiah drew a steady breath. "It's not through armies, nor through mortal strength," he responded. "The Almighty's response will arrive in a manner you don't anticipate." The priests departed with laughter, while Isaiah remained there, eyes focused on the altar, his heart burdened. That same evening, while praying at home, Isaiah had another brief vision. He saw multitudes of people, not only Israelites, but individuals from many nations, speaking various languages and coming from different cultures, all moving toward a brilliant light on the horizon. "The nation that walked in darkness has witnessed a brilliant light," he whispered, repeating the words forming in his mind. The following day, he returned to the central plaza and proclaimed, "The nation that walked in darkness will witness a brilliant light. Those who live in the territory of death's shadow, upon them the Lord's radiance will beam." Yet, as previously, many disregarded him. Others chuckled. Some, increasingly furious, started hurling rocks at him. Isaiah evaded and, shielded by Jeremiah, succeeded in escaping through Jerusalem's narrow passages. Once safely at home, he dropped to his knees. "Master, how will all this occur? When? Where? Who will this child be? How will the nation trust?" Once more, quiet seemed to respond. A blend of promise and bewilderment filled the prophet's spirit. Isaiah understood he was experiencing something far beyond his comprehension, yet the complete significance remained concealed from his vision. Isaiah had not yet fully grasped how this would transform everything. The beacon of promise Isaiah bore after the vision of the ruler of peace was starting to fade under the burden of the fresh messages the Almighty entrusted to him. The words now reaching his spirit were harsh, slicing like a blade with two edges. There were no longer pledges of instant relief. Now what the Lord wanted him to announce was condemnation. The following morning, Isaiah approached the temple entrance with ashen features and empty eyes from countless evenings spent mourning in solitude. "Jeremiah," he summoned his companion, his voice shaking. "Today, the words the Lord has delivered to me are overwhelming." Jeremiah observed him with worry. "More condemnation, Isaiah." The prophet simply acknowledged, drawing a long breath before lifting his voice to everyone passing the temple steps. "Citizens of Israel, people of Judah, the Lord of armies declares, disaster to Assyria, the instrument of my wrath. Through it I will defeat defiant nations. And regarding you, residents of Jerusalem, your pride will be humbled, the arrogant will be brought down, and the territory will be devastated." People stopped briefly. An odd stillness lingered in the atmosphere, but whispers quickly emerged. "He has completely lost his sanity," remarked one of the elders. "Always that tone of condemnation. Where is the merciful deity our forefathers served?" Another ridiculed. Isaiah descended from the steps, moving through the pathways as he continued to announce, "Towns will be destroyed, trees will be cut down, vineyards ruined. Judah's arrogance will be shattered. You place faith in mortal partnerships, in your military forces. Understand this. The time will arrive when your soldiers will retreat without glancing back." Jeremiah walked alongside him, his head bowed. "Isaiah, they refuse to hear. They have no desire to hear." "I understand," the prophet responded, his voice burdened. "Yet I cannot stay quiet." That evening, Isaiah scarcely rested. Kneeling on the frigid ground in prayer, he pleaded, "Master, for how long? How long must I announce condemnation and devastation? How long must I witness closed expressions, unhearing ears, and stubborn spirits?" And as an answer, another vision materialized before his exhausted eyes. He observed burned territories, dwellings turned to powder, children weeping in the pathways, mothers grieving, and religious leaders with ripped clothing sitting among the ruins. "This is the consequence of rebellion," he murmured as tears flowed down his face. The following day, during a small meeting with a group of cultivators, Isaiah attempted to caution them. "Your land will be taken, your crops ruined. The invader will arrive like a cloud of insects. Listen to the Lord's voice while opportunity remains." One of the men rose with fury. "Be quiet, prophet. Our troubles are governmental, not sacred. We refuse to hear your warnings any longer." Isaiah remained steadfast. "You may quiet me, yet you cannot quiet the Almighty's voice." Jeremiah once more drew him away, fearing Isaiah would be attacked immediately. As they moved through the narrow pathways, Isaiah abruptly halted. His gaze was locked on something only he could perceive. "Jeremiah, I care for them. I care for this nation, yet their spirits are so resistant," Isaiah spoke with a shattered voice. "How can I endure witnessing all of this and be unable to prevent it?" "You've accomplished everything possible," Jeremiah responded, placing a hand on his companion's shoulder. "All that remains now is to petition the Lord." Isaiah agreed, yet the burden of the calling was almost too much to bear. That evening in stillness, he once more secluded himself in the temple, kneeling beside the altar. "Master, my spirit is shattered. The words you provide me are heavy as rocks. How long? How long?" A powerful gust swept through the temple fabric. Isaiah felt a chill travel down his back. The Almighty had revealed to him the results of defiance. Yet the prophet sensed that the anguish to follow would not belong to the people alone. He himself would still encounter pain he could not yet fathom. Isaiah questioned if he could endure any more, unaware that the deepest suffering was still approaching. Weeks went by, and Isaiah's spirit remained in perpetual turmoil. The burden of the judgment prophecies still overwhelmed him. Yet amid the anguish, a fresh vision started to appear during his dawn prayers. It was a bitter morning. The wind sliced through Jerusalem's streets as Isaiah once more ascended the hill, where he frequently searched for answers. He knelt on the parched earth, hands raised toward the heavens. "Master, how long will I witness only destruction? How long will you reveal to me only condemnation?" As he prayed, his eyes shut, and then a new scene started to take shape before him. It was not a vision of conflict, nor of devastation, but of a person of modest appearance with a weathered face, shoulders stooped as though bearing an unseen weight. Isaiah narrowed his eyes, attempting to observe more distinctly. "Who is this?" he whispered as the vision grew sharper. A gentle yet strong voice resonated in his thoughts. "Behold my worker whom I support, my selected one in whom my spirit rejoices. I will place my spirit upon him, and he will establish fairness among the nations." Isaiah opened his eyes, breathing quickly. Perspiration fell from his brow despite the morning cold. "A worker?" he murmured, standing gradually. "Who is this person?" That same day, as he moved through the city's narrow pathways, Isaiah encountered familiar countenances. Some regarded him with contempt, others with sympathy. He understood his standing among the citizens was increasingly tarnished, yet in that moment, none of it concerned him. His thoughts were entirely occupied by the image of the worker. Upon encountering Jeremiah again, Isaiah chose to reveal what he had witnessed. "Jeremiah, I experienced another vision." "Another one?" his companion asked with a concerned expression. "Yes, but this time it differed. It wasn't concerning conflict or condemnation. It was regarding a person, a worker." Jeremiah looked puzzled. "A worker? Who?" "I cannot say." Isaiah shook his head, clearly bewildered. Yet he was extraordinary. There was something divine about him, and simultaneously such profound modesty. And what was his purpose? Isaiah drew a long breath. He established fairness, yet without crying out, without lifting his voice in the streets. He didn't snap a damaged reed, nor extinguish a dying flame. He bore anguish as though it belonged to him. Jeremiah remained quiet for a moment, absorbing every word. "Isaiah, do you believe this person already walks among us?" "I cannot tell," the prophet responded, gazing toward the distant horizon. "Yet I sense his purpose will surpass anything I've ever proclaimed." In the following days, Isaiah started recording the words entering his thoughts, almost as relief. He stopped, drawing a deep breath, sensing the significance of each word his pen expressed. "From the mother's womb," he whispered, "a selected one, from before birth." One afternoon, while crossing the market area, a young man approached with a ridiculing tone. "Listen, prophet, now you speak of a mysterious worker. Who comes next? An unseen ruler? A force of heavenly beings?" Mockery erupted around him. Isaiah remained silent, yet internally the inner struggle intensified. That evening, resting in bed, Isaiah could not sleep. The images from the vision tormented him. The countenance of that worker, the expression of mercy, the look of anguish and resolve combined. He stood and moved to the small table where he stored his writings, and started recording again. "I have appointed you as illumination to the nations, so you may carry my deliverance to the earth's farthest reaches." Isaiah stopped briefly, studying the sentence. Illumination to the nations. That was inconceivable. Deliverance, not merely for Israel. He pressed his palms against his face, attempting to organize his thoughts. "What does all this signify, Master? Who is this worker? Why does he bear such great anguish?" A shiver traveled down his spine. For the first time, Isaiah sensed that the story being unveiled to him extended far beyond his comprehension. Isaiah was about to uncover something that would transform everything he understood. Gradually, Isaiah's words regarding the worker started to resonate more powerfully through Jerusalem's streets. Yet, instead of providing relief, they created bewilderment, annoyance, and most importantly, dismissal. On an overcast morning, Isaiah positioned himself at one of the city's most crowded street intersections. His voice sounded steady, yet burdened with grief. "Hear me, descendants of Israel. The Lord has unveiled his worker, a person of griefs, familiar with anguish, scorned and abandoned by people." Pedestrians paused momentarily. Some stared with scorn, others with apathy. "There he starts again," grumbled a trader, "always discussing anguish. Who desires to hear such things? We wish to hear about triumph, about deliverance, not about pain," Isaiah proceeded, disregarding the sharp stares surrounding him. "The worker will present his back to those who beat him, and his face to those who tear his whiskers. He will not conceal his countenance from mockery or saliva. He will be degraded, yet he will not speak to protect himself. Suddenly, a rock flew and struck the earth right next to his feet. "Stop, Isaiah," yelled a man with fury in his gaze. "I've had enough of your messages of catastrophe." Other voices responded, "Be quiet, prophet of misery. Why would the Almighty select a feeble man as his worker? We desire a liberator, a fighter." Isaiah felt his chest constrict. Even while surrounded by the gathering, the burden of isolation weighed heavier than ever previously. Later that afternoon, as he walked home, Isaiah encountered something that wounded even more profoundly. His own relative Eliab, whom he had matured with and shared numerous experiences, was standing at the entrance. "Isaiah," Eliab started, looking around to ensure no one was eavesdropping, "I've come to request you please cease this." "Cease?" Isaiah replied, his voice cracking. "People are claiming you've lost your sanity. No one desires to conduct business with our household any longer. My daughters are being shunned by their companions. Our kinfolk, they feel disgrace because of your reputation." Isaiah bowed his head. The attack wounded deeply. "Eliab, I didn't select this, yet the Almighty selected me. I cannot remain quiet." His relative tightened his hands in exasperation. "Then face the results by yourself. Don't rely on me any further." Without awaiting a response, Eliab turned and departed. Jeremiah, who had observed from afar, came closer. "Isaiah, even your household now." "Even them," Isaiah responded, eyes brimming with tears. That evening, Isaiah retreated into the temple. He dropped to his knees before the altar and called out, "Master, how long? How long will I be ridiculed? How long will I be spurned by those I cherish?" As he mourned, a fresh vision started to form. This time, the worker was even more distinct. Isaiah witnessed the kind-eyed man being pushed, struck, spit upon. The worker stayed quiet, bearing every assault without fighting back. Isaiah cried out in torment, "Why? Why such great anguish? Who is this person, Master?" Yet the vision didn't conclude there. Isaiah's attention was directed to a detail he hadn't observed previously. He witnessed blood. The worker's face was stained with blood. Yet it wasn't merely blood. It was streaming from open gashes on his back, as though he had been whipped, penalized, publicly shamed. Isaiah hid his face in despair. "My Lord, what is this? Who would inflict such brutality upon an innocent person?" His heart raced. The tears streamed without control. And there, alone and spurned on the temple ground, the prophet realized that the anguish he bore was only a dim reflection of the anguish that this worker would suffer. Amid rejection, Isaiah witnesses a frightening detail in the vision. Isaiah could not rest. The scenes from the recent vision tormented him evening after evening. Each time he shut his eyes, he observed that person's countenance, the worker, an expression so filled with pain, with rejection, and simultaneously with a peculiar and unexplainable mercy. On a frigid morning, Isaiah climbed the same hill where he had prayed countless times previously. He knelt with his face against the earth and cried out in agony, "Master, please, I can endure this no longer. Why do you make me witness this?" And once more, as many times previously, the heavens seemed to split open before him. The vision arrived, powerful and unyielding. Isaiah witnessed the worker, now in greater detail than ever previously. The person moved slowly down a narrow pathway, surrounded by people who regarded him with contempt. Some spat upon the earth as he walked by, others moved their heads in disapproval. An internal voice started to speak in Isaiah's thoughts, as though the Almighty himself was speaking the words, He was scorned and abandoned by people, a person of griefs, familiar with anguish. Isaiah struggled for air. He witnessed the worker being shoved, pulled, struck without compassion. His face was swollen, marked with bruises. His eyes, barely visible from countless blows, still expressed love. How can he appear like that? Isaiah whispered, tears streaming without restraint. And the voice proceeded, like someone from whom people turn away their faces. He was scorned, and we valued him not. Isaiah fell to his knees, his entire frame shaking. The anguish he observed was so genuine, so overwhelming, it felt as though it penetrated his own body. Suddenly the scene changed. Now the worker was being flogged. Isaiah witnessed his back torn, cut open, bleeding with each strike. "No," the prophet cried, "this exceeds my limits. I cannot endure it." Yet the vision persisted. The lashes descended harshly, the flesh split in pieces, blood poured, mingling with the earth's dust. And still the worker did not protest. He did not struggle. He did not oppose. Why? Why does he accept this? Isaiah whispered through his weeping. And then, as though the Almighty himself responded, the holy voice proceeded. "Certainly he carried our anguish and shouldered our pain. Yet we thought him disciplined by the Lord, struck by him, and tormented." Isaiah, overwhelmed, shook his head, attempting to dismiss the image. Yet it remained fixed, harsh, genuine. The vision persisted. Now the worker was being taken somewhere. Isaiah couldn't observe exactly where, yet he could hear the sounds of yelling, of ridicule, and the distant crying of women. Yet he was wounded for our rebellions. He was broken for our wrongdoings, the voice proceeded. Isaiah felt his energy abandon him. His legs weakened, and he fell completely to the earth. "Broken," he whispered, "because of our guilt, our transgressions." The burden of the revelation was overwhelming. Then the concluding scene of that vision hit him like a strike to the chest. The worker, lying motionless, his body marked with injuries, eyes shut, without life. Isaiah covered his face with his hands and cried out in despair, "Master, I can endure no more. Don't reveal any more to me. It exceeds my capacity." The wind swept violently across the hill. Withered leaves whirled around the prophet lying flat. He stayed there, unmoving, mourning. Jeremiah had been looking for him all morning when he finally discovered him there. "Isaiah, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Isaiah raised his gaze, eyes swollen and shattered, his tone faint and filled with anguish. "No, Jeremiah, I'm not. What I witnessed, what the Lord revealed to me, I feel like I cannot handle it any longer." Jeremiah assisted him in standing, though Isaiah understood that what he had just experienced was merely the start of much deeper anguish. He sensed he could take no more, unaware this was just the opening. Isaiah could hardly raise himself from the earth following the vision of the injured and degraded servant. The scenes remained burned into his consciousness with frightening vividness. The phrases he had listened to resonated like quiet thunder within his spirit. Even while returning home, his limbs felt heavy as metal. Every footstep was pulled ahead, as though the burden of all the agony he had observed pressed down on his back. Jeremiah followed closely, observing with profound worry. "Isaiah," he spoke softly, resting a palm on his back. "Since that vision occurred, you hardly talk, hardly rest. What did you witness?" Isaiah halted, drew a long breath, and answered in a quiet tone, "Something that, Jeremiah, something I cannot even describe. It feels like the heavens themselves mourned, like the condemnation I always declared wasn't coming upon the wicked, but upon someone blameless." That evening, Isaiah shut himself inside his study. He picked up his parchment, his inkpot, and started writing, his fingers shaking as he released what his spirit could no longer hold. The phrases poured forth like a stream, agonizing and unavoidable, yet he was wounded for our wrongdoings. He was broken for our sins. The chastisement that gave us harmony was placed on him, and through his injuries we are made whole. Isaiah stopped. The tears dropped without notice. The ink container fell from his grip, marking the paper. He drew a long breath, attempting to steady his feelings. "Wounded," he murmured. "But in what way?" He pressed a palm against his chest, sensing it constrict. The scenes came back with intensity. The servant now fastened to something. Isaiah examined more closely. Timber, limbs extended outward, hands and feet pierced by something he had never witnessed before. What is this?" he murmured, fighting to understand. It was an execution method Isaiah had never encountered. No documentation of such a technique existed in his era. It was something brutal, gradual, extended torment. The vision went on. The servant remained there without life, his form drenched in blood. Crowds surrounding him, laughing, ridiculing, gesturing accusingly. He was mistreated and tormented, yet he did not speak. Like a young sheep brought to slaughter, and as a ewe before those who shear her remains quiet, so he did not speak. The phrases arrived as though the Almighty himself spoke them to his soul. Isaiah released the pen and buried his face in both palms. "Why, Lord? Why does this person bear all of this without protest? Why doesn't he speak up for himself?" He wept in anguish. He remembered the court proceedings he had observed in Jerusalem, people yelling, fighting for their existence before the authorities. But the servant, he stayed quiet. How can anyone face false accusations and still embrace it? The inquiries hammered through the prophet's thoughts. In another brief vision, Isaiah witnessed the servant's form being removed from that timber framework. A person carefully covered him in fabric, transported him to a fresh burial place, hollowed from stone. He was given a resting place with the evil and with the wealthy in his passing, Isaiah muttered, amazed by the precision of the scenes. The tears came back, now stronger. "It doesn't make sense," he yelled, standing quickly and overturning papers and ink containers. "Why a blameless person? Why must someone so righteous endure like this?" Jeremiah, overhearing the outcry, hurried into the chamber. "Isaiah, what's wrong?" Isaiah, with reddened eyes and ink-marked face, responded through weeping, "I witnessed it. I witnessed every moment, the torment, the strikes, the spikes, the shame, the end." Jeremiah stayed quiet briefly, amazed. "But why?" he eventually questioned. Isaiah gazed at his companion, his eyes showing anguish and wonder. "Jeremiah," he spoke, his tone quiet yet steady. "It wasn't for his wrongdoings, it was for ours. All the blame, all the anguish that belonged to us was placed on him." His companion moved backward as though attempting to understand those statements. "But Isaiah," he struggled to say, "this is too harsh. Nobody would do that for people who turned away from him." Isaiah slowly agreed. Nobody except someone chosen directly by the Almighty, someone with a mission far beyond our comprehension. Quiet surrounded the chamber. The two remained there still, absorbed in the significance of that discovery. Isaiah lifted the parchment once more and kept writing, even as his hand shook, though he had committed no harm, nor was any lies in his speech. He understood that regardless of how much anguish these statements held, they needed to be recorded. They were statements that would survive countless generations, yet as he absorbed himself in the scenes of torment, something fresh started to emerge at the conclusion of the vision, something Isaiah could not yet completely understand, but that made him even more disturbed. He witnessed a brightness, something past death, an element that shouldn't exist, something that challenged all reason of what he had just observed. Isaiah ceased writing, took a long breath, and spoke to himself with a confused expression. This cannot be. Isaiah understood he was not merely describing torment, but something beyond imagination. Isaiah stayed still, his gaze locked on the parchment, his hand continuing to shake above the wooden surface. The scenes of the servant's agony, degradation, and death were too clear in his recollection, as though he had been there during every instant, experiencing every strike, every drop, every muted cry. But now, something fresh, something that challenged all human reasoning, started to form in his thoughts. As he attempted to complete writing the closing words about the servant's death, a sudden brightness entered his sight. It was no common brightness. It was powerful, nearly overwhelming. Isaiah naturally shut his eyes, yet the scene developing before him stayed vivid, remarkably vivid. He witnessed the same servant, now living. "No, this cannot be." He spoke softly, his voice strained. Isaiah opened his eyes widely, as though to remove the vision, but when he shut them once more, the scene continued. The servant, the one he had just observed, beaten, wounded, deceased, was now upright. His expression was peaceful, his eyes filled with existence. The marks of suffering remained present, but something else had replaced them. Something Isaiah couldn't identify, but it made him shake. A gentle voice, like a heavenly murmur, rang within him. Following the distress of his spirit, he will witness the brightness and be content. Isaiah sensed the earth move under his feet. Brightness, content, following such suffering. He spoke quietly, hiding his face with his hands, attempting to control the tempest of feelings. He quickly stood from the surface and started walking around the chamber. "This cannot be," he said again. "Nobody comes back from death, nobody." The sound of the entrance opening stopped his thinking. Jeremiah came in, breathless. "Isaiah, stories are circulating. People are assembling, insisting that you cease talking. They claim your statements are troubling everyone." Isaiah, eyes focused on the ground, answered in a quiet voice. "Jeremiah, what I've just witnessed, even I can hardly accept it." "What?" Jeremiah moved nearer. Isaiah took a long breath, as though struggling to arrange his thinking. "I witnessed existence following death. I witnessed the servant, the one who was broken, wounded. I witnessed him, upright, living, as though death itself had been conquered." Jeremiah stepped away, shocked. "Isaiah, that's not possible." "I understand," the prophet answered, tears dropping slowly. "But I witnessed it, with these eyes." Isaiah approached his surface, lifted the parchment, and with still shaking hands started to write again. And it satisfied the Lord to break him, making him endure. And when he offers his life as a sacrifice for wrongdoing, he will witness his descendants. He will extend his life, and the purpose of the Lord will succeed through his actions. He stopped briefly, contemplating each phrase he was recording. "He will extend his life," he said again, attempting to comprehend. "Does this mean he will exist, even after being broken?" Jeremiah, still amazed, settled beside him. "Isaiah, do you understand what you're declaring? You're recording that a person, an actual person, will perish and then exist again." Isaiah agreed slowly. "That's precisely it. And furthermore, he gazed at his companion, his eyes filled with wonder. He won't simply exist again. He will witness the reward for his agony. He will observe the results of his sacrifice, as though death didn't hold the ultimate power over him." Quiet surrounded the chamber. Isaiah understood that sharing this with the people would cause even more ridicule, more dismissal, more suffering. Who would accept a return from death? Who would embrace such an extraordinary prophecy? He shut his eyes, drew a long breath, and, still kneeling, spoke a prayer softly. "Lord, I'm positioned at the boundary of something my thoughts cannot understand. I require comprehension. I require your power." In that instant, as the breeze moved softly through the partially opened window, Isaiah sensed a fresh certainty start to develop in his spirit. Something magnificent, something too groundbreaking to understand alone, was being recorded through his fingers. Isaiah understood he was positioned at the boundary of something far too groundbreaking to comprehend alone. The days in Jerusalem stayed burdensome, as though the atmosphere itself held the significance of Isaiah's prophecies. Each announcement he proclaimed seemed to strip away more of the people's confidence. Conflict, hunger, condemnation, agony, everything was happening just as he had proclaimed. Yet that morning, when awakening, Isaiah sensed something changed in his spirit. Sitting at his bed's edge, he shut his eyes and prayed quietly. "Lord, following all I have witnessed, following all I have listened to, does any hope remain?" And in that instant, a fresh vision started to develop. Isaiah witnessed fields flourishing where there had only been barren ground. He witnessed children playing in the roads without terror. He witnessed men and women happily reconstructing the barriers of Jerusalem. Joy and melodies rang through the city. A soft voice, almost like a murmur, surrounded the space. "The Spirit of the Almighty Lord rests upon me, because the Lord has chosen me to deliver good tidings to the heartbroken. He has dispatched me to heal the heartbroken, to announce freedom to the imprisoned and liberation from darkness for the confined, to announce the season of the Lord's blessing and the day of our God's justice, to console all who grieve." Isaiah opened his eyes abruptly, his heart racing. "Hope," he spoke softly. Without delaying, he rushed from his dwelling. He moved through the roads, crossed the city centers until he arrived at the temple. There, with a steady and passionate voice, he started to declare, "O Jerusalem, O people of Judah, hear, a season of renewal approaches. It won't forever be dust and sorrow. There will be solace for those who cry. There will be liberation for the downtrodden." The people, accustomed to Isaiah's severe announcements, watched in amazement. Some moved nearer, interested. Isaiah questioned an aged woman, "Are you claiming that following everything there remains hope?" Isaiah grinned, his eyes brimming with tears. "Yes," he responded with certainty. "Following the deepest darkness, the light appears once more. God has not abandoned us." Jeremiah, always beside him, rested a hand on his companion's back. "This is the announcement you've been expecting, isn't it?" Isaiah agreed. "God revealed judgment to me, revealed suffering to me, but now he reveals salvation to me, a fresh start, a new opportunity for all of us." The next days were changed. Isaiah was still dismissed by some, but for the first time he witnessed focused gazes, receptive spirits, people ready to listen about a brighter tomorrow. He started to document this fresh vision with particular attention, to grant to those who grieve in Zion a crown rather than dust, the oil of happiness rather than sorrow, a robe of worship rather than a spirit of hopelessness. They will be named oaks of virtue, a growth of the Lord for the showing of his glory. As he recorded, tears flowed down his cheeks, but this time they were not from anguish, they were from hope. Jeremiah observed him from afar and spoke to another companion, "I've never witnessed Isaiah so resolved, so filled with energy. Yet even with all this restored vigor, something still troubled the prophet's spirit. There was an element, a fragment of the mystery that stayed concealed." As much as he talked of renewal and hope, Isaiah sensed that the ultimate purpose, the deepest response to all the visions, had not yet been completely disclosed. That evening, as the chilly breeze moved the drapes in his dwelling, Isaiah knelt once more, alone. Lord, you have revealed to me the anguish, the judgment, the salvation. But I sense there is more, much more, something that connects it all, something that will provide meaning to every phrase I've recorded. He stayed there for hours, waiting in quiet. Weariness overtook him, and Isaiah collapsed asleep right there on the ground. But in his slumber, a fresh light started to emerge on the edge of his thoughts, something magnificent, frightening, and simultaneously glorious. But the ultimate disclosure, the true response to the inquiry, why is the book of Isaiah the most remarkable in the Bible, was yet to arrive. Isaiah awakened still on his knees, his face pressed against the stone ground. The morning slowly entered his modest dwelling, throwing golden rays of light through the gaps in the window. His body hurt, his knees were injured, but there was a different kind of calm, and simultaneously, a strain in the atmosphere he had never experienced before. He rose slowly, cleansed his face, drew a long breath, and with shaking fingers lifted a fresh parchment. Something in his soul urged him. The phrases arrived with crushing immediacy. Isaiah shut his eyes. The visions came back. But this time, everything appeared to form a pattern. He witnessed the servant, witnessed the extraordinary birth from a maiden. He witnessed the child mature, filled with understanding, bringing relief to the troubled, restoration to the ill, liberty to the bound. He also witnessed the contempt, the treachery, the agony, the end, and then existence appearing where there had only been death. Isaiah opened his eyes, tears flowing down his cheeks. "My God," he murmured, voice cracking. "Everything leads to him. Everything I witnessed, every phrase I spoke, it's concerning one individual man, one individual rescuer." Jeremiah hurried into the chamber, shouting to him, "Isaiah, are you well? You appear weak." Isaiah gazed at him with eyes gleaming, as though seeing past what human sight could detect. "Jeremiah, I comprehend now. I finally comprehend." "Comprehend what?" Isaiah drew a long breath and replied, a combination of feeling and amazement in his voice. "All the visions, every phrase of condemnation, every pledge of salvation, every scene of torment and honor, it all leads to the Messiah, the servant, Emmanuel, the ruler of harmony. They are all him, one person, one design, one rescuer." Jeremiah remained in quiet, amazed. "But Isaiah, how can this be? You're talking of things that will occur centuries ahead. How can you be so sure?" Isaiah lifted the parchment and with a steady voice recited, "He shall witness the reward of his soul's labor and be content. Through his understanding my virtuous servant shall make many righteous, for he shall carry their wrongdoings." The prophet placed down the pen, his eyes overflowing with tears as he gazed at his companion. "I am recording the good news itself, even before it occurs." Jeremiah collapsed into a chair, wordless. "This is incredible," he mumbled. Isaiah went on, "The peoples will witness him. Rulers will close their mouths because of him. He will be elevated, raised up, and tremendously honored. However, prior to that moment, he would face rejection, be wounded, and suffer on our behalf." Isaiah stood up, moved toward the window, and stared into the distance. "The complete picture remains unclear to me, Jeremiah, yet I am certain of this truth. When this chosen servant appears, he will accomplish everything the Almighty has revealed to me. Each statement, each sorrow, each commitment will find its completion." His companion, still overwhelmed, whispered quietly, "What about the nation, Isaiah? Will they accept him?" Isaiah's face showed both anguish and optimism as he responded with a gentle smile. "Many will embrace him, while others will turn away. However, when these events unfold and each prediction comes to pass, all nations will recognize the truth. He shut his eyes, inhaled slowly, and while looking toward the sky, proclaimed with conviction, "The Almighty has declared this, and his declarations are unchanging." In that instant, Isaiah felt profound assurance fill his spirit. He had been selected to document humanity's greatest design. This design would remain mysterious for generations, yet it was taking shape at that very moment through each sentence and every prediction he spoke. As he completed his writing, Isaiah placed his pen aside, breathed deeply, and smiled through his tears. Do you now comprehend why Isaiah's writings represent the most remarkable book in Scripture? This truth may astound you. Upon completing his visions, Isaiah might not have realized the full impact of his legacy to mankind. He remained simply human, experiencing uncertainty, anxiety, and weeping, yet possessing exceptional bravery. He was someone who decided to follow divine guidance despite widespread rejection from those around him. Despite incomplete understanding, he continued documenting, speaking, and delivering prophecies. Today, examining Isaiah's writings reveals more than ancient manuscripts or beautiful poetry. We discover a prophetic roadmap, a chronological guide spanning generations, directing us toward the Messiah's arrival, Jesus Christ. Each element he described, including the miraculous conception, intense agony, public rejection, and rising from death, occurred with accuracy that surpasses human comprehension. What about the unfulfilled prophecies? Isaiah also described the second arrival, the magnificent return, and an everlasting peaceful kingdom without death, grief, weeping, or suffering. Isaiah chapter 25, verse 8. Isaiah's message serves as an invitation, urging you to choose trust as he did, despite facing rejection, to declare hope during difficulties, and to maintain faith in divine promises when circumstances suggest otherwise. If Isaiah, living centuries before Christ, could perceive so clearly what we would later comprehend, consider what the Almighty might still show you today. Therefore, the question reaching our generation remains both simple and profound. What is your response? Will you embrace the same faith and bravery Isaiah demonstrated? Will you trust that just as his words were fulfilled, divine promises for your existence will also materialize? Isaiah's book transcends mere history. It stands as living proof that the Almighty communicates. When he speaks, nothing can prevent his words from becoming reality. Stand up, have faith, and declare his truth. The same God who summoned Isaiah is summoning you now. If this narrative inspired you, 2 additional videos showcasing equally remarkable biblical figures will appear on your display. Select them, view the content, subscribe to our channel, and show your appreciation. May the Almighty speak to you as he spoke to Isaiah during the most surprising times.